Good evening. We should call this the Brooksville experience, Brookridge experience, excuse me. What a crowd. I really appreciate the fact that you took the time tonight. Serious business, and you showed up. Meetings called to order. Please rise for a moment of silence and the pledge to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. If you have cell phones, please turn them off out of respect for others. Also, as the meeting proceeds, please try to focus up toward the front as opposed to your neighbor, because it may be annoying to the other neighbor. It's a polite way of saying keep quiet. Just be considerate. That's all we ask. There's one item on the agenda this evening, one item of new business. Oh, the lady handed me, there's a car out there with P58 license plate 5TL, your lights are on. She said that it's not an automatic, she didn't think it was an automatic situation. So, one more time, P58 5TL. That's your car, we'll give you 5 minutes. Okay, the only item on the agenda is proposed 55 plus deed restriction amendment. Does everybody have a copy? It's on the back of the agenda. It's only a couple of paragraphs. Make sure you have one, because you're going to need it as the evening proceeds. A reminder, you must be a BCBO member to speak this evening. This is a membership meeting. The attorney is here. He's going to speak briefly about what 55 plus is all about, how it originated, etc. It just didn't come out of thin air. It's a program. It's a federal government program, and he'll talk to you about that. Just very briefly, we don't want to take a lot of time, but you should know what 55 plus is all about. He will then go into the proposed amendment, sentence by sentence, and explain the ramifications. He's agreed that he's going to take the time so that we all understand the legalese. That's the whole point of the meeting, so that we can go out of here tonight and know what 55 plus is really all about. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. Tonight is the night to clear them up, and it's wonderful that we have such an audience. There are only 2 paragraphs on that back side. The bulk of the first one is already in our documents. Only a minor change there. The major change is in that second paragraph. And that's what we're going to focus on this evening. And there will be a question and answer period as soon as he goes through. If everybody feels comfortable with what has been discussed at that point, there will be a question and answer period. We were going to set up a couple of podiums, but I guess one would have to go in the men's room and the other in the ladies' room. So Mr. Giroux and I are going to go around with mics so that you can just get up, or we'll hand you a mic so you can ask a question. The reason for that is there are a lot of people here. You may all have the same question. If you're listening, your question may be answered without you even having to ask it. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. And like I just said, we'll ask you to use the microphone. Now, you do need to pay attention because there's going to be a quiz later. See what those people are sitting over there, the unit reps? If you don't do well on the quiz, you're going over there. And we'll have another session, one more time, just to make sure you get it right. We are so convinced that we need to get out correct and accurate information that is very, very important. I'm going to introduce our attorney. He's been with us, I think, 2+ years. His name is Stephen Bezer. His office is in Tampa. It's a large firm. And he has guided us now for a couple of years through the courts. Remember when we talked about this a couple of years ago? We had to go through the courts, and we had to do this, we had to do that. We had some minor changes in our documents that we did about a month ago. This is the gentleman that walked us through that. And he did it, well, in attorney speak, at a modest cost. Attorneys are attorneys, but he's been very, very good to us. And it hasn't cost us anywhere near as much as it did before. But there are other issues with what happened before, not just the 55 plus. So I'm going to turn the mic over now to Mr. Stephen Bezer.
Come around here, ready? Thank you. Good evening. Good evening. All right, I'm going to start off by telling you something about fair housing, because a lot of other things are going to get lost. But the first thing you have to remember is that fair housing has to do with occupancy, not title. I think that answered half the questions in the room. What did he just say? He said that it had to do with occupancy, not title. As we get older, one of the big concerns is, who can I leave my home to? You can leave it to anybody you want. If this restriction's in place, you can still leave it to anybody you want. It has nothing to do with title. It has to do with occupancy. And that's why when you look at the restriction, it says not less than 80% of the occupied parcels. It's only occupancy. So who owns it? It could be a corporation, it could be an estate, a partnership, your child, grandchild. I could own it, whomever. It really doesn't matter. So that's one of the hardest concepts for people to grasp. So I wanted to put it out there first and say that it has nothing to do with title. It's occupancy. So if it's vacant, then we don't care. And if it's occupied, we do care. All right, so that's really going to be the fundamental concept that people have to work with, because otherwise it doesn't have that same personal impact. It doesn't matter who you are going to put in your will or your trust, or who you're going to marry, or whatever it is, or bring in your home, because it's an occupy issue. All right. The history of this. Back in the 60s, we had all kinds of discrimination going on, and so the federal government got involved in 1960. Except make it more conservative. We could go 85%, 90, or even 100% of the properties have to have one person 55 and older. We could not make it less. So that 80% number, the age 55, right out of federal law, we could have gone to 60 or some other number, but this is the baseline minimum in order to qualify for the right to discriminate. What are we discriminating against? Occupancy by younger folks less than 55. So we're earning the right to do that by invoking that particular provision from the federal law. The next sentence in the restriction says the association shall promulgate rules which may require owners to provide documentation acceptable to the association establishing the age of each person who is occupying the owner's parcel. Again, we go to the owner, not to the occupant, and say, owner, who's living in your home? Because if it's rented out or you have family staying there, or whatever the situation is, the owner is responsible, and they have to provide documentation that's acceptable. We know that some people are sensitive about their age. It happens, all right? And we're okay with that, as long as we can prove it some other way. We went to his 60th birthday party. Okay, we have 2 people who signed an affidavit. We went to his 60th birthday party. His family showed up. He never showed us a thing. We can establish he's 60 years old. Easy enough, or he retired, or whatever it is, at age 65, and we can document that. So we don't necessarily need to see your birth certificate. Driver's license is quite helpful. Okay, voter registration, something that is a government document that we can use. No, I cannot take a letter from you saying, I promise you I am 60 years old. It doesn't work. Not acceptable, okay? So we can work with you a little bit if you're shy. On the other hand, just your word is not going to do it. So what we have to do is about every couple of years take a census. And if we know that these folks have lived in the same property and still them staying there and they're still on our records, we don't have to go get it. They provided us copies of their driver's licenses, maybe something else that was acceptable to the association. And you can come up with a whole long list of things. I prefer driver's licenses, but there are many other documents that do confirm your age. And like I said, if we have to go out and do something circumstantial, we can do that, okay? Cooperate with us and you can say, hey, I just flat out don't want to tell you my age, but I can prove it because. And it's not just that I got a free dinner at Denny's. Yeah. The next one is the 20%. All right, the 20%. So we had 80% being one person 55 and older. Then we have to deal with the remaining 20%. What are we going to do with that? And I'll tell you the sentence that is in the amendment at this point says the remaining 20% of the parcels shall be reserved for persons who obtain title through inheritance or devise. So if you do in fact leave the property to somebody who is not 55 and older, he or she can come live here because they got it by inheritance or devise. So even if you did that, they can still live here. Not a problem. For surviving family members or caretakers who resided in the parcel prior to the permanent departure or demise of the qualifying resident who was 55 or older, and for no other transactions. Let me stop at the 55 and older part for a second. All right, your spouse, significant other, roommate is in fact 55 and older. You're not. They leave, they pass away. You're there. You can continue to stay there. You're not getting kicked out. You can continue to stay there even though you're not 55 or older. You did have a 55-year or older person residing there, what we call a qualifying resident. They pass away, you divorce, they move out, whatever it is, you can still stay. Not a problem. So it is, again, occupancy-based, and that's, by the way, that scenario, the remaining survivors, caretakers, someone who was in the home before the departure of the qualifying person, that came from the floor of the Senate when they had the debate about the 80%. Why the 80%? What are we going to do with it? This was the intent of Congress to do this. It is not stated in the legislation. This is strictly the federal intent. Do we have to go with this? Absolutely not. We can do something else with that 20% as long as we don't encroach upon the 80%, where we start doing open market transactions, which is why the next sentence says, and for no other transactions, because what happens is you get the creep of the numbers start changing, and you get 19% are under 55, and then 20%, and then 21%, and you're done. You've lost your exemption. And that's the danger of having the 20% be open market. They get their open market transaction sell to a young family, they do, and then all of a sudden, the next person can't do it, or the entire community loses their exemption. So that's the problem with open market transactions. Next sentence, persons who are residing within a parcel as of the date of the recording of the amendment who are less than 55 years of age may continue to reside in the parcel notwithstanding this amendment. Again, repeating that. If you're under 55 now, you still stay here. This does not affect you. If you're under 55 when we record the amendment, assuming it passes, you still stay here. Nobody is getting thrown out. Nobody's being pushed out. Nobody's being removed. Everybody who's a resident today is still entitled to be a resident tomorrow. It still is your home. You can stay here. It really doesn't matter. Our only qualification, we need to get to the 80%. If we're not there, and just look at the audience, I suspect we're there. But, you know, we have to document it. All right. If we're not, we're going to get there. And what this amendment is, the Congress as well as the state wants every community who is trying to be exempt to show an intention to qualify. So we do that by putting it in the declaration. You can do it without it. You really could. But it's a hard way to go. This way, if we get the appropriate vote of the members, we pass this amendment, we're showing to the state or to the federal government, we do intend to be 55 and older, and we do intend to comply with the rules. Then we'll keep the census, and we'll have her driver's license and his affidavit because he doesn't want us to know his age. He's down the frontier, and I can pick on him. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, good spirit. But, you know, if I lived here, yeah, I'd be concerned about, am I going to throw me out if I'm under 55? The answer is no. I'm going to be concerned about who I can will my property to, anybody I want to. Those are typically the two most common questions we get. The Housing for Older Persons is regulated by the Florida Commission on Human Relations out of Tallahassee. Yes, you do have to register with them. It costs the entire sum of $20 to register, and it's about every 2 years. So it's about $10 a year to maintain your status with them. If you don't register with them, there's no penalty, and it does not affect the enforceability. It's really a marketing tool. If you are a real estate agent or someone looking for housing, you go through, I want to live in a senior community. You can go through the listing through the Florida Commission on Human Relations, and they give you, and they've got a county-by-county breakdown. You go to Hernando County, you look through all the communities that are registered to provide housing for older persons under the statute, and that's really one of the benefits. Also, it helps them when they get a complaint. You know, if we implement this and a young family shows up, you know, kids and all that, and they say, hey, we want to move in here, people Brookridge won't let us in, they go, they're registered. They're good to go. They can exclude you from living in here, end of investigation. If you weren't registered, they might have to come down here and look and say, oh, you do comply, you are 55 and older, you have it, and then they go away. So that's really what the implications are there. There's no other cost of administration. It means Ray keeps a few more records around, you know, more documentation on your age and who's living in your home, not the age of the owner, age of the residents. That's really it. It's very common in many different communities have this. I understand it can be controversial by way of, well, gee, it might limit my market if I try to sell, or it might be an advantage if you try to sell. And I don't know who's right in that particular discussion. Those of you who are near, who are over 55, you found this place and found that it has a lifestyle that you want to adopt as your own. Other people may do the same thing. I don't know if I had, you know, 2 little children and I'm 25 years old, if I want to reside in this community or not. It probably doesn't have a playground for my children. Nope. So, and that's the issue. With that, Rick, can I open it up? Yes. I'm happy to take questions, and I guess we have some portable mics here. I'll give you this one. I'll take that one.
Yeah. Get a mic, Ray. Ray and I will be around.
Ray, got a question right down in front here.
What happens to people that own a home in here and are renting them?
What happens to people who are here and renting them? The renters maintain the status if they're under 55 as long as they stay here. So if they're 20 years...
The ones that are here now, fine.
Here now is fine.
But the ones that are coming in, you know, after we do the amendment.
After you do the amendment, all tenants would also have to comply with this. So your tenant would have to be 55 55 and older. Ray's got a mic for you, sir. So your current tenants can stay forever. If you can renew their leases, I don't care if they're 20 years old today, they can stay the next 35 years. But if they move out, you have to get new tenants. New tenants would have to be 55 and older. Sir.
Hi. If you put your house on the open market, it goes to a broker.
That's right.
And it's sold as a 55 and above community. The broker has to sell it that way, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Again, he can sell it to whomever he wants, but he or she would have to disclose that there's a deed restriction on age, so that occupancy is age restricted.
Lives in the house, right?
It's who lives in the house.
The owner can be less than 55 and
Owner-
buy it.
Yes, absolutely.
It's the occupant, the key term.
That's why I started with that concept, because I figured people get lost in the middle of my travel. Sir. Oh,
Yes, Councilor.
Yes, sir. Sorry.
As we try to go forward and endeavor to establish this exemption, I'm wondering if there's any consideration of the concept of attrition and how that will skew the data, and also how it's factored in when heirs or spouses are inheriting these residents, how that's factored into the 80-20. Currently, we're at 81-19. And as we go forward into the future, are any of these folks that are promoting this amendment factoring in for attrition, and how that will skew the data? As you said, this will have to be reviewed every 2 years. If we fall below 80%, we immediately lose the exemption. As we go forward into the future, and there is, God forbid, there will be attrition, that will skew the data as well. So then we open ourselves up to, say, inheritors or spouses who are being currently denied. Don't we take ourselves into the realm of age discrimination if we lose that exemption?
You're making a lot of assumptions here on what's going on. If you look at the 81-19, I'm going to take your numbers as being the premise. The 19 are basically non-qualifying, that they eventually will either age out or leave. In other words, they'll age into being qualifying. They'll go into the 81, then 82, and so forth, or they will leave. And so you have that area being repopulated. The 80% remains age restricted, so it doesn't fall the other way. The attrition never works against you. The heirs and spouses, again, typically your heirs...
My point is that the attrition is effective to the 80%, less to the 19%, which will automatically skew the 19% upwards, which is what you say you're trying to prevent.
Let's be...
People 55 and older will be more affected by this. That's what I'm referring to in the census tracking or attrition. And that will affect the factoring of this percentage. And that will put us on tenuous ground with the maintaining of the exemption, will it not?
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. Because what happens, let's look at your 80%. That is age restricted. That doesn't go down if one person lives in the home and he or she is 90 years old and passes away. The next person who can occupy that house is either going to be surviving spouse, there's none, heir, okay, somebody who's 90 years old. How many of you are heirs and are living here because you've inherited? I got 2 out of how many? 300. 2 out of how many? Okay, and that's really the point. I'm surprised I don't have 3, because that'd be about 1%.
Actually, I brought 6.
Bought is one thing. Occupy. Yeah. You can't occupy all 6. So we'll come back to you. The 19 is going to go down. That can't go up naturally. It only goes up when a surviving spouse is less than 55. Okay, we're all adults. How many of you have a spouse who's less than 55?
Don't tell me.
I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. And you all look pretty damn healthy. Okay? The chances, they're already underage here, but in this population of the people we have in this community, the chances of a surviving spouse being 55, less than 55, is 5 out of 300, and again, these young gentlemen, and it was mostly the gentlemen, are very young. And so the chances of them passing away, and they're already grandfathered in as it is, but just statistically, if you look at it, it's really not a factor in this community. I have worked with communities who are, they're marginally 55s. That's not here, and so I don't have that issue. We could have addressed it with this community if, in fact, we were dealing with that, but we just don't have it. As the 19 move out or age up, it becomes more availability, more capacity for the heirs and surviving spouses, so it'll always be there. And if the surviving spouse or heir, we only had 2 gentlemen here who were heirs, come in. I've got the 19 now. I've got room for a few more. It's just not going to happen. I mean, if when my dad was like 90 years old, I wasn't going to pick up my family, my career, and go move where he was to live in his house. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't happen. You like to think that maybe it'll happen. These 2 gentlemen did. It can happen. It's part of reality. But it doesn't happen a lot. And so statistically, it's not a concern. If, in fact, you became the aberration and things changed, you can change the amendment. Obviously, you're stuck with the 80-20 concept. You could change the definition of the 20%. You could do something different with it. But that's really, it's a hypothetical upon assumptions that I don't think the statistics are with you. Just looking at the people tonight and asking the questions, who inherited and is living here because of inheritance, and who has a spouse under 55. And that assumes you pass away. And it's just, the statistics just don't back you up on it. Sir?
Could I interrupt on that 81% figure?
Sure.
That's not a final figure yet.
Okay.
That's a current figure now. We have delinquent people who we've not been able to get in touch with. So that figure is going to go up because we probably still have 200 or 300 people. This is a large community. You got to realize that 2,700 places here, 2,700. We haven't gotten to them all. That figure is going to go up if that helps you. Sorry.
Thanks, Rick. Sir.
Hello. Are there, if any, financial benefits of becoming 55 and older community?
I can't project financial benefits. I can tell you the law. And really it's going to be up to the people in the room to make that decision. Is this better for you? Is it more attractive to have a senior community where we can be assured that the people to the left of us, to the right of us, people who come in here to use the facilities and the amenities are approximately our same age, and that we don't have to worry about as many children. Of course, we have grandchildren, they can come and visit and all that, but they don't live here. And so we don't have that situation here. Is that a value to you? And if it is, then that's the economics of it. If, in fact, it's a detriment, and people say, wait a minute, I think it's a negative to have a senior community, then they can make the vote against it and say, I think it's economically not in my best interest to do that. Which Ray has it? That Ray.
Mr. President, my name is Wayne.
I know that.
I advocate for veterans in Hernando County and around the country. I'm presently working with 26 and 28-year-old veterans who have sacrificed their legs, their arms, for the freedoms that we enjoy in this country. I have a hard time finding housing for them. The federal government, in their fantastic way of taking care of our veterans, and I see a lot of veterans out here, young men that just spoke, the original UDT guys, that's pre-SEAL Team 6, for those who don't know. They get about $2,700 a month from the federal government. That's all they get. And I know a young lady right now who's 26, and she has to crawl around the floor down the Tampa VA with a 3-year-old daughter, and she has no legs, lost an erect. What can we do for those folks? We have an 81% now. Are we going to say that one of these young men or women cannot come into our community and live amongst us simply because they're not 55, sir? Otherwise, I really, 55 or not, I'm for it. You know? But other than that, and I run into this all over the country, sir.
veterans, and I'm very proud of what you can do for the veterans, and I urge you to keep doing it. But this community is not designed for large-scale handicaps, such as losing all arms and legs and things of that nature, and it really isn't the point of the Fair Housing Act.
Understand that. I'm just asking perhaps for an exemption. Is Lou here? Lou lost both his legs to a landmine in Vietnam.
Yeah.
I was forcibly retired after 30 years due to service connection incident. I was 48 when I moved in. I'm just asking perhaps we look at...
Thought you were done there.
Well, it wasn't. We said something. I was forcibly retired after 30 years due to service-connected conditions. I was 48 when I moved in here. There's a gentleman that we see at our dances. His name is Lou. I don't know if he's here. He lost both his legs to a landmine in Vietnam. I'm just asking. 55 and over is fantastic. Okay? I don't want your children or grandchildren living next to me if I don't have to have them. All right? Only my grandchildren are good kids.
Absolutely. I heard it.
So I'm just asking that we can make some type of exemption, and I haven't had to place anybody in here yet. Although there are programs that the VA will support to help pay for modifying our homes and stuff like that. I would like to see something done for those who have given body parts so that we can enjoy this beautiful community we're in. We're not speaking a foreign language.
Okay. Wayne, I may be able to work something with you on that. Say no to that.
I talked to the administrator because I'm reading this. I'm not so sure I got the thing. This kind of presents a problem for me. I have a daughter who's 11 years old, and we love it here. The thing is, we bought the place as snowbirds, and the schools have been very cooperative, but we want to move down here and want to buy a real nice one in the park. Now, it's my understanding that where I own one now, I could buy another one and ditch my first one and still be in here. Is that correct? Am I stuck in the one I've got?
I would like to see you occupying that second one by the time we get this passed.
So, I couldn't do it after it's passed.
Correct. Not unless you're 55.
No, I'm very old, but
I'm young from here.
Well, no, I'm 73, but my child is biological, but 11 years old.
Okay.
And, but you're saying, because I understood that if I owned a place, I mean, it would be even balanced. Whoever bought mine would be 55, and then the one I went into would have my kid. It would be an even wash.
No, you can't swap unit for unit. Like this lady was asking about tenants. If her non-qualifying tenants want to stay there, they can stay forever. They move over to this lady's home to rent, not so much. They're not going to be able to do it. They're no longer grandfathered. It's per parcel, so it's your parcel. Now, you look great for being over 55. Congratulations. You're the qualifying person. You go live wherever you want here because one person 55 and older. Okay.
So I can change, but I can change and take my kid now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I can.
You're the qualifying. I was looking at you and I said, gosh, this guy's not 55.
Yeah.
Bless you. I seriously,
okay.
You're fine.
Okay.
No, he does not have to do 4 because he's 50. He's over 55. He goes anywhere he wants. He can come and go. He can be a snowbird or this ray. Sir.
I'd just like to ask a question. You talk about the residents at this time. If you have a younger than 55-year-old property owner with no house, how does that affect this?
Doesn't affect it at all. Vacant lots don't count.
Don't count how?
They don't count at all. They're not in the census. So Ray gave us the number 2,700. If that's 2,700 homes, fine. If 10 of those are lots, then we're really 2,690. because we don't count 2,700. Vacant lots don't count at all. Actually, vacant homes don't count at all either.
All right, more specific then, is that if this under 55-year-old person owned this lot and in 5 years, still not being 55, wanted to put a house on it, can
they can put a house on it, they just cannot live there. So, again, people who buy it for retirement would have to find a tenant, 55 and older, until they become the qualifying 55 and older person. All in the back.
Yeah, just to go back to about 3 questions ago, would be the value of our properties. Brookridge has been reasonably successful for 40 years. Is there any way of getting some sort of history? Can we dig up something with realtors or whatever to see if our property values are going to maintain or go up with this? This is a big move, and I think everybody in here should be really, really keen to know what's going to happen. There's got to be a way to find that out. Sure.
I think you can ask, but I'm not sure if you're going to get an accurate answer, because, and I don't mean to, make an inference here, but aren't you really a de facto 55 and older? Don't you come here because there are older persons who are 55 and older? So you're already there. That's part of the property values already. So I can't say that we're going to be changing something, making it better or worse. We're going to be putting this in, and whether that's affirming what's already here or fine-tuning it, that's in the eye of the beholder. So the information, I'm not sure if you get accurate information. It'd be interesting to ask real estate agents if they could find comparable communities that are under 55 and comparable communities that are 55 and older, and how much they cost and how long people hold on to their homes, how hard it is to find a tenant, and so forth. With this Ray or that Ray? Oh, ma'am. Ray is the sir. Ma'am is the question.
I have a question about a child.
Yes.
I have 2 friends that are taking care of their grandchildren. I am an executrix for my granddaughters. And if I should have to take care of them, God forbid, I love them dearly, but I don't know how the neighbors would feel. I would like to know that I could bring them here and not be told that I have to go before the board and get permission.
These are your grandchildren.
Yes, they are.
They're related to you, aren't they?
Yeah.
You're over 55?
Yeah.
You're good. You're fine. Grandchildren can come live with you. Gentlemen.
If a renter is living in a home,
Okay.
and his lease is up, can he still stay there? Can he release?
The question was, you've got an under 55 tenant, lease is up, can they stay there? Yes, they can stay there forever. They're grandfathered in that last sentence. Somebody who's less than 55 may continue to reside in the parcel. Again, not own, it's not the issue. Reside. Tenants reside, notwithstanding the amendment, and that is forever. So if you have a good tenant, they're 20 years old, they can stay 35 more years and be 55 and still be your tenant.
Speaking for snowbirds, I have a number of friends that are under 55 that have purchased here in the last 5 years, and will we lose all those? Somebody in their early 50s that speculate in retirement, will they not be able to purchase in here now?
Again, it's purchase they can do all the time. This has nothing to do with purchase, it has to do with occupancy. So if they purchased it for their retirement, they have to find that tenant 55 or older. I will tell you, we get into a little bit of a problem with the snowbird who says, that's my home for when I retire, and I came down this week to do the maintenance on it. Change the filters and clean whatever, and I'm here for 4 or 5 days, and yeah, I did use the swimming pool and whatever. They're not going to upset our senses. They have a home elsewhere, they're here doing maintenance, we're going to tolerate that. In other words, it's not going to be a violation, we're not going to fine them, we're not going to kick them out, we're not going to do nasty on them. But if they came down here and said, I'm here for the summer, and I'm going to be here next summer too, we have a problem with that because this is census-based. Anytime, any day, is really the census. And so we've got to be careful in knowing who's there and why. This is Ray.
Hi, Rick Stratton, Unit 3. Vietnam veteran, great for the veterans to be alive.
Yes.
I understand the weak street documents when they moved in order to track the 80-20 program. Is there a process in place to track those over 55 that passed away, move out, due to foreclosure, whatever, or nursing home? Using a planogram on the 80-20 program, who implements the new numbers?
That's why, first of all, thank you for your service. That's why we have the association shall promulgate rules. We have things like the gate entry and mailing for coupons and notices for meetings. It's hard to get in here, so we do have the person who leaves, whatever the situation is. It's hard to get in here undetected, and so we have ways of keeping track. And if, as part of the rules that are promulgated, before you get your gate pass or mark, whatever it is, you must show proof of age, driver's license. Now I have them. So whether it's approval for sale or rent, or if it's the gate pass or something else, those rules will allow us to keep that census. And we may decide 5 years from now there's been some turnover, we have some uncertainties, so we're going to go door to door. That's what these people are for. Right, door to door. And you know this gentleman, he lives in your community, you say, hey, check, move on, have a nice day. It's just that easy, all the way to the back.
My question is, looking at your paragraph that you drafted,
yes.
The only thing I can see in there that we can use as a way to effectively make sure that this thing is done is the word occupied. My question is, define occupied. Is that 3 days? Is that a year? Is that 2 months? When is this property not occupied?
Good question. If you go on HUD's website, they have a Q&A, frequently asked questions and answers. You printed them out. There are a couple versions of that, and you get into all kinds of scenarios where you have people who are here for the summer, people who are transient, and we're going to go with their rules. And I'm not going to recite all their different rules about occupancy. Basically, if you are making this home, even if it's your summer home, you count. That's why I was making the distinction with the person coming in to do the cleaning. It's really short term. They're doing things to the property. They're allowed to have a life. They can come and dance and play bingo, whatever it is, but they are leaving. They're going back to their home. They came here for a limited purpose, dealing with the property. That's all well and good. Not going to be a problem. But now there's no time on it, and you really have to look. It's very fact intensive. If you do look at this thing from HUD, they have some really good examples about scenarios that happen. The owner goes to the nursing home. The kids come down to take care of the property while the parent is in the nursing home or in the hospital or on the trip around the world. And you look at that and see how they treat that without getting into the specifics of those, because they're endless. It will follow whatever the HUD guidelines are, and they are very specific, and you can look at the trip around the world versus the hospital and see how they treat it, and that's what we would do, just follow the federal law on that. They're pointing at each other. Never see two races pointing at each other?
If this gentleman over here said he has a tenant,
right?
He's a good tenant. He doesn't want to lose it.
Right.
Now he loses this tenant. He has to then rent to someone 55, right?
Yes, sir.
And it's all depends. It doesn't mean he owns the property. It's all based on who's occupying the property.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Based on occupancy.
Thank you very much, Councilor.
Thank you. Thank you. And if you think about it, if we say that the owners had to be 55, why would we say that the tenants could be less? Just they all ought to be treated the same.
And the other thing is, how come this wasn't on the ballot in November for us to vote on?
We weren't ready for it in November. We were waiting for the judge to make a ruling and clear this up. We had a prior injunction against the association from old lawsuit, and so we weren't quite ready for it at that point, and then drafting the language. It's just, this was the timing of it. I did not bring the file. It's out of my car, actually. It's yay thick. But it was a timing issue, and this is an informational meeting. Nobody's voting on this tonight. We're here to get information from you and to provide information. And so there's no vote tonight either.
When will there be?
Ray? Ray, do you know what the schedule is? I'm sure Ray would know.
Yes, I'll let everybody know later.
Okay.
I think I do have a question out here.
I have a question. When we bought in here 13 years ago or so, we were in the realtor's office and they gave us a piece of paper that we had to sign to say whether we wanted to sell our property to a 55 and older, or if we did not, we had to sign a paper saying we would not sell to a 55 and older. Now, is that a legal document, or is that something that is going to get overruled now?
I couldn't tell you without seeing it, but it does not sound even close to legal.
Well, why would they have us sign
I have no idea
this?
why someone would do something.
I know I'm not the only one that did it either.
Yeah.
They've done it to many people in this part.
The answer to that question is, years ago, this was marketed as a 55-plus community, when in fact it wasn't.
Yes, for a period it was.
And that's when all those signatures were required, etc. You're quite right. You can light cigarettes with that paper.
Maybe. Just somebody on the microphone, whoever's got the one. That was my point about the fact that, in fact, it has operated. For a while, it was held out to be people who had to sign documents. You thought you were moving in. That's really what has been told to people, and exactly what has happened in practice. You have the census.
Yes. My question is on the certification. Is that every 2 years, or can it be less?
Two different things here. The certification up to the state is a form letter. They give you a sample, Ray can download it, fill it out, and send it up there. It doesn't say a thing. It doesn't say, for example, we have 2,412 this and 13 vacant and so many lots. You don't do that kind of census reported. It just says we are and we complied, and you send it up there. That's all that is, and that's the $20 every 2 years. As far as my census concept, that's really going to be a feel-as-you-go situation. If we know, based on entry codes and changing names on the official records of the association, you say, wait a minute, that home is occupied, but for some reason we don't have age verification, we may have to put these folks to work and do the door-to-doors. And I would urge you to do that occasionally just to make sure. And whether it's every 2 years or 3 years, yes, I'd like to see you do it 2 years. I think it's silly. Because this gentleman has lived here how long? 10 years. If his village rep, neighborhood rep, whatever these folks are, says, I know he's lived here for 10 years and he's there, I don't have to go verify it. He's 55, we got him once, we don't have to get him 5 different times. That's what it would take under the HUD recommendations. It's not a law that you have to do it, but if HUD showed up, we'd have to be able to show them a census that's current. And they could spot check it and go to his house and go, what's your name? Yep, that one's right. Her name, that one's right. Her name, that one's right. And then they go home. And they check 3 or 4 and say, yeah, you have an accurate census. Because of the nature of the community where you have controlled access, we automatically have a really good read on who's coming in and who's going and who has access to the community. So the answer is, as to the state form, that has no information, no data on it whatsoever. Our census, we have to keep that accurate literally every day. But how we do that, we do it well to begin with, and we keep track of our folks. We know this gentleman 10 years, gentleman in the back 16 years. If it's always this gentleman and that's his home and he's here, we're good.
My concern was, so during that 2-year period, should our numbers fluctuate, we would still be certified as being a 55-plus community, and we wouldn't be open to lawsuits for age discrimination.
The certification isn't really certification. That's what I was saying. It has no impact on the enforceability of your deed restriction. that certification is a listing with Tallahassee. And if you want to hold yourself out as and market it, take the listing, the registration with Tallahassee, pay the $20, you're good for 2 years. That has really nothing to do with the enforceability or the census. Now, to your point, if you dropped on, that's why I'm saying your census is really every day. If we ended up with a bunch of surviving spouses and inheritances, and all of a sudden we're pushing it over, and some people slip through, and they're under 55, we go, whoops, we lost our 80%, we've lost our exemption. Has nothing to do with registration. We've lost it. Can we regain it? Yes, we can. But during the time that we don't have it, we cannot discriminate. So the community really, you could not say to somebody, I can't rent you, you're not 55, because that's discrimination. So we would have to alert everybody saying, as of February 5th, we lost our exemption. So if somebody comes to you on February 6th, you have to rent to a community, to a family. You have to sell to someone with a family because you don't have that exemption, because we told you on the 5th we lost our 80%. That's really the key, is when we lose the 80%. If the gentleman who's over there is correct that the attrition, this gentleman right here, is correct that the attrition pushes it in the wrong direction such that you lose the 80%, then you've lost your exemption, and you cannot say that we are age restricted and you'd have to allow anyone to move in. And it could happen any day. And so this is why that Ray is going to have to keep good records, and you do really want it to be well above the 80% so that you have a margin of error. And if someone is visiting that day and happens to knock on that door, and the little kids come running out, and they go, okay, this one doesn't have 55 and older, and so they just kind of tilt the numbers in the other direction. You're fortunate to have about 2,700 homes that you can work with, so that one or two aren't really going to throw it. This Ray. Sir.
This is a question I'm sure that a lot of people out here are thinking about.
Okay.
Please. And that is, how exactly is this going to be enforced, and by who?
Okay. Enforcement comes in at least two different areas. It depends on how we're looking at enforcement. Number one, the state and federal government enforce it, such that if we, the association, does badly, we aren't doing things correctly, we're not following this, we can get in trouble with them. So that's enforcement from that side. Enforcement from within is the second way of enforcement, and that can be done through the association, the same as any other violation of the deed restrictions. And so if you were doing something that violates the deed restrictions, I assume you're going to get a letter from the office, probably 2 letters. You may be subject to a fine. Enforcement actions could be through the court system. If you want to, just thumb your nose at everything and say, I'm going to be 21 years old, I'm going to bring my 2 kids in here, and you can't stop me. Okay, we're going to ask the judge to enforce the deed restriction. And the judge can issue an injunction and throw you out. Yeah, and basically tell you to leave the community because you're not complying with the deed restriction. Okay, whoever's got a mic. Ray, if you bring one down here next.
Yeah. Hi, I would like to know, if it does go to a 55 plus, would there be any state funding, like to help us out with repairs or, putting in handicap facilities and so forth?
Not a dime. Yeah, this is private property. They cannot use state funds for that. Someone else have a microphone. There you go, sir.
Yes, you mentioned this $20 in this report that has to go to Tallahassee. This is from the association, not each member.
That's correct, for the entire, great question. That's $20 for the entire community, one $20 payment. So that's what, a penny a home or something? Very expensive. Right in the back.
Okay, yeah. Go me to stand up.
Please.
I think I'm just repeating what I'm hearing you say. I am over 55 and I have a young daughter. And as long as I'm alive and in there, she can come and she can bring her kids as long as I'm an occupant, if I read this correctly. Correct?
Right. You are the qualifying 55 and older person.
maybe I'm confusing the issue. You can have people, fairly young old people, give myself a compliment, and you can bring your child and even your grandchild. What I'm understanding from what other people are saying, it's when there's no one 55 or older in the house, then you would be worrying about a non-occupant, no occupants over the age of 55.
Correct. That is absolutely correct.
So when my daughter runs up to answer the door, that doesn't mean I'm not 55, darn it.
Nice. Sir.
Michael Andy, Unit 4. Sir. Question. We have a big sign out by the road that says it's a restricted community. If we are successful in passing this, will it then say 55 plus deed restricted community?
I would recommend that you do that, yes. The reason I would recommend you do it, there's finally a legal question. Because both the state and the federal law are very much based on intent. And so the more indications of the intent, the restriction going into your documents, the sign out front, the rules on the census, all of that shows the intent to rely upon the exemption and to qualify, and that's what they're looking for, because they'll also look for things that are not consistent with that, and so putting the sign out front is one of the better ways of doing it. Yes, ma'am. Hi. He says,
okay.
Hi.
Hi. My parents live in this community for 15 years. My brother just had a house built, and I did too. But we all have children in their 30s. Now, if they want to come live here and say, God forbid, I get sick, or I'm in a facility, or I die, what happens to them if they're living in my house and I go?
Absolutely.
They have to leave.
No.
I was going to say, do I have to plan on moving?
No, not at all. Not at all. Great question. That's why I said, reading in the middle, the departure, and that's a polite word for dying in most situations, but not always. You decide that you're going to go to a permanent facility elsewhere. They put you in the home. My daughter reminds me she gets to pick my home. I love her dearly. Seriously, you have your children living with you. All is good. You pass away, they can stay forever, even though they're less than 55, because they were in the home when you had a qualifying 55-year and older person. Gentleman in the back, basically the same question, different variation on the same theme. Anybody who was in the home, whether it was a caretaker, significant other, spouse, child, anybody who was in that home when you left to go to the nursing home, passed away, got divorced, whatever it is, you left, they stayed, they get to stay. Because they had that qualifying 55-year and older person. That's why the census is so important. Because we can document, your kids were there, you were the qualifying 55 and older, you've given them insurance. You're there, you leave, they stay.
I have been a resident here for a number of years, and I was one of those, when we came here, we understood we were purchasing a property in a 55-plus community. And I don't know what happened, but this form that somebody referred to that we were to sign to ensure that we kept it a 55 community, there was an opportunity to sign a waiver, and it was my understanding, as people were having trouble selling, that the real estate agents locally were convincing people to sign this waiver so they could sell to anybody. How do we ensure, if we're a 55-plus community, that real estate agents are honoring this?
It's interesting what the reference is, and I'm familiar with it. For a period of time, people were signing documents basically purporting to exempt themselves from the restriction, recording them in the public records. Do talk to your attorney and your title agent about what you've just done to your title before you ever consider doing that again. This restriction will apply across the board, and no one person can sign a waiver or any document, put it in public records and block you. As to the real estate agents and their obligation to honor it, they do not ask for the broker's license, because you typically have a salesperson and a broker. Ask for the broker's license, and then you send a complaint to the Florida Department of Real Estate, the Florida Real Estate Commission in Orlando, and I can give you the complaint forms. We have a little stack of them in our office. Because once in a while we do find real estate agents who don't necessarily comply with deed restrictions. It's not only this. I mean, you have somebody who has an oversized dog, a commercial vehicle, something that doesn't belong in a particular community, and they say, don't worry about the dog in the truck. They're fine. My commission is 7%, sign here. That's, it gets to be a problem, particularly if that happens more than once in a community. You say, wait a minute, you knew well the first time, but we got you on the second time, and that happens. It's obviously far more egregious when it deals with discrimination than it is a deed restriction. So if a real estate agent wants to be at odds with our deed restriction, we're going to take on that real estate agent pretty firmly. Sir?
Yes, one of the underlying concerns seems to be the safety of the community and people within the community. Do you have an opinion as to whether limiting our membership to 55 and older is any more effective than doing an effective background check? And can you use a background check legally to segregate out those undesirables?
Okay, do I have an opinion on this and the impact on safety? No. Thanks, sir. Do I have an opinion on the impact of this on safety? No. As the gentleman pointed out, if you have a crime watch and some of those things in place, they tend to be very safe, and you have, and again, I've heard it and read it. I've been, working with Brookridge for a number of years, actually, and I've always heard that about the community, that it is safe, not that, you have burglars within or anything like that. As far as background checks, you just hit one of my soft spots. I don't like background checks because I live in Pinellas County. I can go down to the courthouse and find out when I got a parking ticket in 1972 in Pinellas County. Yet, if somebody came in from any other country other than the United States to live here, legally or illegally, I could not find out if they were a rapist, robber, or murderer. Background checks are great if you want to find out something about an American citizen who has been an American citizen for a long time. Then you can find out about their background. Anyone else from the entire planet, you cannot. And it's just a problem. Okay, that's one. Two, there are people back in the 70s who did drugs. But they're good people today. They just were in college at that time and they were going to do drugs. They have felony convictions on their records. Their civil rights have been restored. So I've got communities who say no convicted felons. Well, shoplifting at Publix can take more than $100, which is pretty easy to do. You're a convicted felon. All right. So I've got a problem with that. If we got the information and we find out they're a convicted felon, they stole something, you can say, well, crimes of violence. Well, leaving the scene of an accident with injuries is a felony. That's violent. So where do you draw the line? And once I let somebody in and say that leaving the scene of an accident with injuries person comes in and we say, well, it was 10 years ago and that's not really what we meant by violent felonies. We meant like firearms and dead people. So we let them in and they hit somebody with their car. Liability for the association? Possibly. Because we knew about it. We knew that they had a propensity to drive badly and run from the scene. And so there's never, I'd rather just not know about this. Another anecdote on this. Those of you who lived in this area probably remember sometime in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a gentleman who went out on the causeway between Clearwater and Tampa. He saw two gentlemen embracing, and he decided he didn't like that, so he threw lighter fluid on them and lit them on fire. And now they sentenced him to Rayford, which is the state prison where bad people go. And he was a condominium dweller. And every year, in fact, I got their meeting next week, there's a condo out on Clearwater Beach. They worry about when he gets out of Rayford, because he's coming back because he actually inherited the unit, and so he can live there. However, 2 years ago they killed him in prison. He's not coming back. But that's just it. These these folks live someplace, and, to your background check question, many of you have children. Some of your children have actually gotten in trouble. There's no background check when they come to home to live with you. They get out of Rayford, your kid gets out of Rayford, at least one of you probably has a child in a prison somewhere, statistically, or who has been in prison, and he or she can come live in this community with mom and dad, or just mom or just dad, without a background check. So now you got 5 minutes on background checks. No, they can't. Well, they're over 18 because they've been in state prison for 10 years. They got that nice pasty tan. Yeah, and that's the problem. So I can't background check everybody. She married this gentleman. She's the qualifying. She's the owner. He's not on the deed. Do we know anything about him? And he's a foreigner too. Yeah, all the way in the back. Hey, Ray.
I just have a quick question. How is the board going to be administered? And what is in our bylaws in terms of the percentage of the $2,700?
Don't have the exact quote on it. It's 2/3 of the votes cast, I believe. Yeah, and Ray's going to address it later. Generally, it's done with a proxy and can be valid. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I have a quick question. I hear a lot about the realtors that we do bad things. I'm retired, so...
Some of my best friends are realtors. That's
yeah, but the question I have, who's going to monitor when, let's say, I'll use me as an example. Let's say I'm not going to live in my home, but I'm going to rent it out, and I am over 55. Yeah, it's way over 55. But, I mean, who's going to monitor that? And check who's in there, because they're not renting to people over 55. They're renting to people with children, dogs, and where does that come in? I mean, a lot of people are going to start renting out their places.
The association will be doing that, and that's why the rule section here on promulgating rules on how to do that. And let's face it, if this passes, and if it passes, if that's your desire to pass it, you vote yes, you're going to look to the left, you're going to look to the right, you're going to look across the street, and you're going to see who's living there. And if it's somebody who doesn't look like they're 55, you're going to call Ray and say, who's living across the street from me, and are they 55? That Ray. Yeah, Ray in the black. That's why he's got the black shirt on tonight. Yeah, you just call Ray. I mean, it really is self-enforcing to a large degree, because you will be sensitive to the issue, and you'll look and see who's living across the street from you.
Not only that, our documents specify that you're responsible as a landlord or landlady to make sure that your tenants indeed comply with the documents and proper age, etc., etc. So everybody in this room has a role. That role begins at home. And then people are violating, we're going to know about it. Do we want to keep Mr. Messer up a little longer? We're begging to wrap it up. Yeah, I'll give you that information right now.
One more question. Last question of the night.
If an individual is on the deed to a piece of property, a piece of property is owned by two individuals, both persons are on the deed. The occupant is under 55. If the occupant vacates the property, moves out of the state, and then decides to come back in, will they be allowed to do that?
No.
Thank you.
Yeah. If the person goes to live someplace else, no. If they went to, say, school, and they didn't declare, they go up to North Carolina to go to school, that's not their occupancy. They maintain this as their address, Florida driver's license with Brookridge address, everything else, this is still their home. They vote here, they have the bank accounts here, let them back in. This is still their home, because they have the intent to return here as their home. If they separate from here, they go back to North Carolina, and they have a North Carolina driver's license, and they give all that other stuff up, they come back here, no. So it's the separation. Again, fact by fact determination.
One more back there. All right. Sorry, one of us will be with you, or you can come up front.
I'll be up here.
You'll be up here for a few minutes more. Come on up and ask. Have we got a good attorney or what? Speaks right to you and tells you how it is. That's really good. Just a few comments and we'll let you go home. The special meeting has been called for February 27th. It's called a special meeting because there are two kinds of meetings that you can have. You have to have an annual meeting every year by law. If you want to change documents and you don't want to do it, or don't do it at the annual meeting, you call a special meeting. A special meeting is a notification of everybody that lives in here, all BCPO members, and if you own property, you're a BCPO member. So we're calling a special meeting, or it has been called, for February 27th. It'll be very similar to this. Since a lot of you got questions, we're going to provide you with coffee and donuts next time. So we would appreciate you coming here. The quorum will be established at that meeting. 7 o'clock, right here, February 27th. Why, at that moment, I just explained why we have that special meeting as required by the documents. Tonight's meeting was designed strictly for informational purposes like we had. I think it turned out very well. I really appreciate so many people turning out, and our attorney has been wonderful. The only item on that agenda for the special meeting is going to be a 55 plus. It's not going to be a long meeting. You must be a BCPO member to speak and to vote. You may vote that evening. Now, the packets went out in the mail today. You will be getting a packet very, very similar to the one you get for the annual meeting, except there'll be less stuff in it. I think it's 2 pages. Page 1 talks about the agenda of the meeting being called. The back of that page, just like tonight, will have the proposed amendment on it, and then there will be a ballot in there. You approve of the amendment, or you don't approve of the amendment. You can mail that back. Remember the 2 envelopes you get? Small, large. Put your ballot in the small envelope, seal it, put it in the large envelope, mail it, or bring it to the office. That was done a few years ago, quite a few years ago now that I think about it, that for security reasons, so people didn't know how you voted. All the information is going to be on the outside of the large envelope, and the inside at the office, you're going to take the ballot envelope out and put it in the ballot box. That'll be counted later. Snowbird friends, I don't know who's taking care of your mail at home, but if that's where your mail goes, and that's where your special meeting notice is going, it's got to come back here. I don't know if the kid's going to do that or what, but nevertheless, if you know of people or your snowbirds yourselves, make sure that you get the information. Probably another week or so you can stop by the office and pick it up if you don't get it from up north, automatically forwarded, etc. But it's important that we get it. Deadline for voting, March 1. You have till March 1. I suggest you vote earlier than that so you don't lose it. The result will be announced at the March 5th workshop board meeting. The March 5th workshop meeting. I had one other thing I wanted to say and I can't think of it.
What's the percentage of voter plurality?
I'm sorry, what?
What percentage passed?
Oh, the percentage, thank you. Yes, 2/3. It's 2/3 of the ballots cast. It's not 2/3 of 2,700. It's 2/3 of the ballots cast. Whichever way you vote, it's important that you vote and we get the ballot. Just keep that in mind. If we get 100 votes, and only 50 yes, it goes down. You know. No, not one vote per house. One vote per lot. If you own 5 lots, you get 5 votes. You must fill out 5 ballots and put them in 5 different envelopes and 5 large envelopes and mail them or drop them off. You need to keep them separate. I'm sorry? Half lots don't count. You need to hold more than a half lot. Half lots don't count. So it's 1 vote per lot. Any other quick questions? Yes. Okay. Whatever you specify. So you better stop down the office to make sure which one it is. She asked, she's a snowbird, she didn't know what address we have on file for her. I don't know at this point either. Okay, well, check it at the office. Go over there and see her. You could probably do it tonight. One other question here. Last question. We got one over here to come up front. That's correct. No. February 27th is going to be the special meeting. No, the ballots won't be. The deadline for balloting is March 1. You will get it back. Yourself, Dad. You may vote at the 27th meeting if you like. That's about it. Just like we do it for the annual meeting. Thank everybody. Thank you for coming.